Hello friends, welcome to this video. So today I'm going to talk about what to do when you're feeling a bit under-inspired, a bit tired, and your mojo is feeling a little bit so-so. And the reason that I'm going to do that is because that's how I'm feeling today. Welcome to my art channel. I feel tired. Just keeping it real. So I've been away from my studio, traveling, visiting family, having a lovely time, doing stuff in my business, and I haven't been tending to my creativity. My sketchbook has been neglected and I'm feeling a little bit under-inspired. So what I tend to do when I feel like that, and I think that is a natural part of creativity, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes we have to acknowledge that and do things to help our own creativity. And what I wanted to share with you today is how I might play about in my sketchbook when I'm feeling like this, when I'm sort of searching for ideas, when I'm not sure what I'm doing. I really consider my sketchbook to be a place where I come back to myself, come back to my creativity. I think it's good to think of your sketchbook as a place of joy, not judgment, play, not perfection. I'm going to have really low expectations today and see what happens. So today's video is not a polished tutorial. I'm really just going to take you with me and share some ways in which I find really helpful to connect back to myself, to connect back to my creativity when, quite frankly, I'm feeling tired and uninspired. So on days when I'm feeling like this, I follow some gentle rituals, guidelines, wisdom that I know get me started. So the very first thing that I like to do when I'm feeling like this is just to take a moment to reflect and think, what am I yearning for? Am I yearning for gestural marks, bold colours, quiet detail, stillness? So a little check-in to think, what would help my creativity? What am I yearning for in this moment? I'm thinking that I want to do something that involves paint or ink on paper and something playful and something low pressure. So the second thing that I like to do after I've checked in about what I'm yearning for is to pick something really easy, to give myself a starting point that is helpful and like a security blanket, something cozy, reassuring, familiar, comforting. So what I tend to do is I'll go back through old sketchbooks, any of the art that I have created in the past, and I'll pick something and I'll use that as my springboard, as my cozy, reassuring blanket to lean on. When you're feeling uninspired, a blank page can feel very blank. So a little bit of familiarity can actually feel like fuel, I think. So I have picked out this sketchbook that's just got some simple drawings, some simple still life drawings of objects around my home. And I just thought I would take one of these drawings and reimagine it, reconnect with it, use it as the starting point for something else. So that's my second piece of advice, to pick something you've already created and use that as your fuel, as your starting point, as your springboard. So you're not creating from scratch, you're actually reimagining. You're taking something that you've already created and you're moving it forward, you're reinventing it, you're using it to support you. So my third recommendation is to limit the supplies, to make it simple. Reduce the friction. What would you find easy to use in this moment? And I am thinking that I'm going to use some black ink and maybe just one pencil. I've got a Derwent pencil. It's a Inktense pencil and the colour is Indian ink, and I thought I'd use that with Indian ink. So just a simple pencil The great thing about Inktense pencils is they're basically water soluble pencils, and you can draw, and then when you add water it turns into ink. So my next piece of advice is to limit the colour palette. A limited colour palette is often a really helpful way to limit the number of decisions, to limit the number of things you have to think about. So because I'm tired, I'm going to just use black. I'm going to use black ink and this black pencil, and that's it. We are giving ourselves some parameters, some constraints, and often there can be freedom in those constraints. So my next piece of advice is to limit your time frame. I think I'm just going to work for 20-25 minutes and see what happens. I think the thing about giving yourself a short period of time is you're sort of bypassing the perfection noise. You know, I think a short time frame, it's a study. It's a quick getting started sort of warm up. It's not a masterpiece. And I think that mentality can then help invite a little bit more freedom. I find that if I have taken a pause from creating for whatever reason and then come back, the first thing I do tends to be a little bit tight, a little bit restrained. I can move into it being really neat and kind of perfectionist. And that isn't what I love in my own art. I love a little bit of that, but I also love it coupled with a sort of wildness and a freedom and a expression and gestural marks and a bit of sort of that sort of joy of expressive drawing and painting. So what I often do is I will give myself a time frame, a short time frame, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, even shorter. And that sort of time frame I find often bypasses that sort of pernickety perfectionist tendency that I might have. If I've got a short time frame, I've got to sort of work with speed and pace, and sometimes that speed and that pace can get me out of my own way and just get the ball rolling with creativity. And then my last recommendation is, because I'm going to go back over something that I've created before, I don't want to just keep replicating and copying and replicating and copying. I want to introduce something new and surprising and different that I haven't explored before. So the reason that I've also picked this particular combination of materials is because I haven't used these combination of materials before. I don't know exactly how this pencil will react with the ink, how they'll work in combination. So that a little bit of surprise and difference and diversity also just keeps things interesting, because the sketchbook page then becomes a place to discover, to explore, to find stuff out. And that's another really good, helpful mindset frame. Because I don't want to create a perfect page. I don't want to kind of my sketchbook to be performative or to be like, look how great I am as an artist. I don't want it to be that at all. I want it to be a place where I play about and make a mess and make mistakes and explore and discover. So I'm just going to take you with me as I create. I'm looking back through this old sketchbook and finding something to act as my source material, as my starting point. Materials that I'm using are Indian ink, which I'm going to pour into a little ceramic dish, and I've got a selection of different brushes. I've just grabbed a few different brushes. There's a big mop head brush, a few smaller brushes. So I'm going to start with the simplest of line drawings, a very simple contour drawing, looking at my original drawing, my original source material, and thinking, what do I like here? And putting that into this new study, ignoring the bits I don't like, just concentrating on some of the shapes, some of the patterns, some of the lines that I'm enjoying in the original, and really just using the original as a guide rope, as a suggestion. And then once I get going with this new sketchbook page, then it will take on a life of its own. I enjoy using these Inktense pencils. When you add clean water to them, it turns the line into a puddle of ink, and I use them really frequently. The colour is very intense and inky when you've added water to your drawn line. I guess that's why they're called ink tents, and they come in loads of really bright colours. So I'll perhaps share some of the pages that I've created using the colours just so you can see what they look like. But today, because I'm wanting to start in an easy, gentle way, I'm limiting my colour palette. So I've just chosen a black pencil. And my plan is really just to create a page in my sketchbook in response to the original drawing, to be quite intuitive, to enjoy myself, to not feel under any pressure to create anything special or interesting or significant, just to get back into the swing of creating, to enjoy the materials, to enjoy the process, to enjoy this time messing around with ink and drawing. And I'm going to build up the page bit by bit. So once I've got a really loose line, outline, drawing, contour drawing, I'm then going to sort of add in pattern, add in line, add in ink, and develop a page until I think it looks interesting. See where it takes me. And it may be that the whole page looks a hot mess, and that's fine. I don't mind that. I hope that I find something out. I'm interested to see how the pencil works in relationship to the ink. They're both the same sort of colour, so I just want to explore what I can do with the pencil, what I can do with the ink, what I can do when I'm in charge of my brushes with the ink, maybe adding in some water to the ink to create a lovely warm grey. Just having some fun, really. It's only a sketchbook page, and I think the more we can enjoy the art making process, the more likely we are to make art. And the more art we make, the better our art becomes, or the more it reflects us as individuals rather than better. Actually, I mean it better reflects our own quirks, our own idiosyncrasies, the things that we are drawn to in our own work. The more we make, the more we discover that, the more we discover our own individual language, our own individual way of making marks. And that's a lovely journey. So if you want to have a go trying something similar, then do experiment using different brushes, incorporating different brushes into one piece. I think it can be really interesting to find out what marks you can make, what shapes you can make, what patterns you can make using your brush in different ways, holding your brush different ways, putting different pressure on your brush. So a sketchbook is a really good place to find out what we can do when we're in charge of our materials, and to try different things out and see what we like, see what we enjoy. And then we can incorporate those things into, maybe more finished or composed pieces. But we only really find out through experimentation, through the doing. Art is very much a practice. And we have to keep practicing, don't we? So my style of drawing and my style of art and the things that I'm interested in, I would describe as semi-abstract. So I'm clearly not trying to create a realistic rendition, an accurate drawing of this chair, this vase, this plant. I'm wanting to create a semi-abstract rendition of these objects. So really using the objects as my inspiration, and my drawing is my response to the objects, not a rendition of the objects. So I'm simplifying the shapes, I'm exaggerating patterns, I'm including lots of lines, I'm bringing the things that I'm interested in into this drawing or this painting or this sketchbook page. And I'm interested in the relationship between the shapes and creating artworks that are sort of rich in pattern. And these objects that I'm drawing have a personal significance to me. So all of these things are embedded within the drawing, and I'm not trying to create something that looks like a perfect copy or photograph of the objects. Clearly, I enjoy my art when it has a sort of naive quality to it, and I'm totally happy when people say to me, a child could draw that. I don't mind that. I know that they mean that as a criticism and to be cruel, but actually that's what I enjoy in my art. And the more I've been creating, the more my art moves away from realism, and it's important to follow our own curiosity in that way, isn't it? And to tune into what you want your art to be and how you want it to feel. And I want my art to feel like there is a freedom in it, inspired by objects that I'm interested in, but then I can take those objects and use them in a way that is unrealistic. You know, I want my sketchbook to feel like a place where I quieten the need for perfection and I turn up the volume of play. And that means I have to not be concerned about the finished outcome. There has to be a place in our creativity, in our creative lives, where we get to practice, play, experiment, divorced from how it looks. And for me, that's my sketchbook. And I don't value my sketchbook for how all the pages look. I value it because of what I have learnt or discovered in the making of those pages. So in making this page, I'm really enjoying the way that the Inktense pencil, when you leave it without water, it's got this kind of scribbly marks, and then I can add some water and it can sort of turn into ink. And that transition, that combination of how the material is working with water, I'm really enjoying. That might be all I take away from this page, and that's fine. That's great. That means I've learnt something. So the sketchbook I'm using is from an Italian brand called Fabriano, and the sketchbook is a Venezia book, and it has quite thick paper, 200 GSM paper. And because I've used this sketchbook for a decade, I know that it can take Indian ink very well and it won't bleed through to the pages underneath. But if you're going to use any new material in your sketchbook, you always need to sort of give it a bit of a test run on a page that has no neighbours, so you don't feel worried about it sort of dripping or seeping through. But I do try and bring quite a anti-precise attitude to my sketchbook. I want it to have paint smears and drips and smudges. My personal preference is not to have a pristine sketchbook. I want it to feel like I can make a mess if I want to. And that is just something that lowers the pressure for me. You know, we've been talking about sometimes we need to rail against the need for a perfect finished outcome. And for me, the more sort of experimental and messy and smudgy and smeary I can be in my sketchbook, the more it lowers those stakes, encourages my sketchbook to feel like a creative tool rather than me trying to create stuff in it that treats it like it's an art gallery, because it isn't an art gallery. It's not the stage, it's the backstage. And the Indian ink I'm using is from the art shop Jackson's, which I buy online. And I buy it in quite big bottles. I think it's about 300 millilitres. And it lasts me for yonks, ages and ages. So this is the initial impetus starting point, the drawing in this sketchbook here. And then this is the quick ink and pencil study. Really, I used this drawing as my security blanket, as my starting point, and I really thought about what do I like here, and I sort of deconstructed the drawing a little bit in my head, thinking, oh, I like these lines, I like the curvy shapes of this chair leg, I like the pattern in this jug, and I just brought that into this piece here. So I think I spent 15-20 minutes on it. I'm really liking how the Inktense pencil when you add water, it turns into this ink. And the thing that I'm liking is the transition between where I've left it as pencil and where I've added water. And that sort of transition where you can just see some of the scribbles still is probably my favourite thing in this page. Those tiny micro discoveries. And this drawing and this exploration is not going to go on a wall, is it? It's not going to go in a gallery. Our sketchbooks are not art galleries. They are our playground. This is not the stage, is it? This is not me performing and showing you or myself how great I am as an artist. This is backstage. This is me getting my materials out and messing about. I hope that was helpful. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And I wish you every success with your own creativity. Get that sketchbook out and go make a mess.